Miss Renee Mims Payne tonight, who's going to be leading the graduate workshop tonight. If you could come up here, I would like to just say a few words about her background. So Miss Renee Payne has over 20 years of experience in graduate admissions. She's worked and volunteered in the field of career development in 3 local colleges, and also was the Career Service Associate here at Central Penn. So let's give her a round of applause and welcome her for her presentation tonight.
Thank you, Rabina. Thank you very much to those who are here with us tonight and to those who are tuning in via Ustream. I'm glad to be here tonight to share some information with you about why you should apply to graduate school, and then once you decide to do it, then how you should do it. Okay. Now, you probably have heard the phrase, when the economy is bad, graduate admissions go up. So, and that actually does hold true in most cases. We've had some really bad goings on with the economy lately for the past several years. Things were looking kind of bad. Things have started to improve a little bit. And because they have started to improve, then grad admissions, at least in some areas, has started to go down a little bit. But that's not to worry, because there's still reason to go ahead and pursue a graduate degree. There really is reason, especially, and some of that reason depends upon the area that you're interested in pursuing. For example, if you read the papers, you hear things on the news or whatever via social media, you hear about there are certain areas of interest that this is not a good area to pursue. For example, if anyone is interested in the humanities, and by the humanities, of course, I'm talking about English, history, philosophy, music, art, theater, those kinds of topics, it's not a real good idea right now to go for a graduate degree in those kinds of areas. Now, you may have heard that, seen that, and it's pretty well known at this point. So if you really like those subject areas, and you're interested in pursuing them in terms of graduate study, well, maybe not, at least not at this time. However, there are other areas that are much more conducive to being open to more lucrative careers, and actually the job prospects are going to be there. They're here now, and they will be there for the short term. For example, when you're thinking about areas like business, accounting, education, anything in the healthcare area, and then information technology or computer science. Those are areas that for the short term and maybe for the long term are really going to be conducive to graduate study. So keep that in mind for those of you who are in any majors that are similar to the ones I just named. Okay, so, but let me just say this, regardless of where you want to go to graduate school and what you want to major in, there are some things that you need to look at and things you need to understand as to why it's important and what it can do for you. For example, it can further your education while you're enhancing your marketability to your employers. You know, in general, someone that has an advanced degree is going to make more money than someone who does not have a graduate or an advanced degree. So it can make you more marketable in the long term. Can also make you more eligible or quicker. You can be eligible more quickly for promotion and or a higher salary. So who doesn't want a higher salary, and who doesn't want to be promoted from time to time, okay? And in many cases, a graduate degree can do that for you much quicker than a bachelor's degree. And of course, you can gain more knowledge in an area of personal or professional interest. Now, I say personal interest because some people, believe it or not, actually want to pursue a master's degree just for their personal enhancement. I mean, it's not necessarily for a job, not necessarily for promotion or a higher salary. It's just some personal interest that they may have. And that does happen from time to time. So again, you're gaining more knowledge in an area of personal or professional interest. Now, the other thing that's a little bit different about going for a graduate degree, you are able to actually concentrate in one specific area all right, say master's in information technology, as opposed to, if you will dig back into your bachelor's degree days, if you remember that when you were working on your bachelor's degree, you were working on a degree that required about 120 credits of work to complete. And of that 120 credits, believe me, all of them were not specific to your major. Probably about half of those were what we might call general education requirements, or just some other requirements that you had to take that may or may not have had anything to do with your major, all right? As a graduate student, you are not going to have to do that. You know, the courses that you're taking are all directly related to whatever that major may be. So then you don't really have to worry about those peripheral courses that you did as an undergraduate student. Okay? And the other thing, in terms of the difference in the graduate degree, when you look at a master's degree, you probably are thinking, how long is this going to take? How many credits is it going to be? A master's degree is typically a minimum of 30 credits to complete. And a doctoral degree, though, is a little bit more. It's going to be probably closer to 90 credits. It could be more. So that you certainly want to be prepared for. Now, when you look at and let's just look at the master's area first, because there are two different levels, of course. There's the master's degrees, and then, of course, there's a doctoral degree. And there actually are two different types of master's degrees. We have the professional degrees, and then we have those that are more research-oriented. For example, a professional degree, training in a specific field of study. Probably the MBA is one of the most common professional master's degrees out there. Master of Business Administration. Then, of course, you have a Master of Social Work. Then, of course, you have a different sort of a professional degree, the medical doctor, Juris Doctor, which, of course, that's medicine and law. Then you have a Doctor of Veterinary Medicine. That's pretty self-explanatory. And then, of course, sometimes, and then from time to time, someone wants to go for a Master's in Public Administration. And then, of course, you also have a Doctor of Dental Surgery. So these are just a number of different types of professional degrees that are out there. And a professional degree actually can be also called a terminal degree, depending on what discipline you're in. Okay, a professional degree is much more hands-on, and it's much more practical, as opposed to a research-oriented degree, which for our purposes here today, the PhD or the EDD, which is a Doctor of Education, it's a little bit more specific just to the field of education. But again, those are the next higher level of an advanced degree, the doctorate, all right, whether it's a PhD or an EDD. And that too can be called a terminal degree, but then you typically, when you're going for a PhD, in many cases, it is to prepare yourself to teach at a college or university level, or to be a high-level administrator in some company, some corporation that is not related to education. So, or if you just want to research some topic or some area for the rest of your life, and then a PhD will prepare you to do that. So I know some of you may be just interested in the master's degree at this point, but then who knows, once you get into that, it might lead you to the PhD at some point, and after that, well, there's nothing after that. I mean, after you have the PhD, that's all there is, okay? Now let's look at delivery modes. You know, once you decide to pursue this, how are you going to do it? Are you just going to drop everything and say, okay, I'm just going to apply and I'm going to go to Penn State University and be a full-time graduate student and drop the rest of my life and don't worry about it. I'm just going to do this PhD and that's it. Well, that can be done, but it's not very common nowadays. Most people nowadays are working full-time, 40 hours a week or so, and they are taking part-time graduate classes. Part-time graduate classes are 1 or 2 courses per whatever that period is, whether it's a term, a semester, whatnot. So you're taking part-time classes and you're still working full-time, so your life is full. You know, there's only 24 hours in a day, but sometimes it makes you wonder when you choose to pursue your graduate degree in this fashion. So you can take these part-time classes in a number of different ways. You can maybe take them, for example, Highmark Blue Shield may offer some classes from Shippensburg University, but they offer them right there at Highmark Blue Shield, which is very convenient for anybody who works there. So some companies and corporations are trying to make it a little bit more conducive for their workers to attain these advanced degrees by offering the classes right there at their work site, which is very convenient. And there are other ways to take these classes. You can take these classes totally online if you like. You can take them in a hybrid or a blended kind of a format, or you can do the old school way, which of course is just go to the classroom, and you're right there in the classroom 1 or 2 nights a week taking your classes. So there are a number of different ways. And these classes can be offered year-round. You can take classes fall, spring, or summer term, or you can just take classes during the fall term and skip the spring term for whatever reason because there's something else going on in your life and you need to take a break, and that's fine. You can come back in. Or you can take classes in what's called an abbreviated or an accelerated format, wherein you take one class for 10 weeks, you take a week or 2 off, you take another class for 10 weeks, you take a week or 2 off. So there are a number of different venues in which you can take these classes, and we're trying to make it, or schools are really trying to make it a little bit more conducive and convenient for you to take these classes. Now, what's important to you when you think about whether or not you want to do this, pursue these graduate classes, and then where you want to pursue them? What's important in terms of the program? What's important in terms of the reputation of the program? Now, I have a little blurb here I want to read, just a paraphrase actually for you. According to payscale.com, I don't know if you all are familiar with that website, but payscale.com's website compiles compensation data, and based on some data that they recently put out, they tell us that the median pay for a Master of Business Administration from the Wharton School of Business is located at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, very highly rated MBA program, probably one of the most highly rated MBA programs in the country, maybe even the world. So what they tell us is that after 2 years, someone who has graduated the Wharton Business School can start out with a salary of $125,000 after 2 years of working in the field, $125,000, and that sum can actually grow to $167,000 after 10 years. Okay, so that's a pretty big jump from 2 years to 10 years, 125 to 167 in terms of their salary. Whereas a school that is not as highly rated as the Wharton School, say University of Massachusetts, not to minimize their program or anything, but the information tells us that after 2 years, this same person can graduate with an MBA and start after 2 years with a salary of $62,000 per year, but then after 10 years only advances to $75,000. Okay, so this is a pretty clear example of how a school's reputation can actually benefit you in terms of your salary and how it can increase in such a short amount of time. Now, that's obviously not the case for every MBA, for every other graduate degree that's out there, but if a program's reputation is important to you, it can also be important to some employers. So, you might want to keep that in mind when you decide where you want to try to pursue this degree. Is that important to you, the program and the school's reputation? How about location? Location could be and maybe should be something that you want to have keep in mind when you're pursuing your graduate degree. You've been here in South Central Pennsylvania how many years? You're thinking, okay, I'm footloose and fancy free. I don't really have any responsibilities or any family ties in this area at this point. I think I want to just try something on the West Coast, or I want to go down south, or I want to go to Hawaii or Alaska or whatever. I mean, the world is your oyster. You have nothing limiting you to stay here right now. So, hey, if that's really important to you, definitely look at some programs that are in areas that you've never been before. You just want to sample something brand new. Think about that. And then finally, friends and family. How important is that to you? If you want to go somewhere where you don't know anybody and you just want to start out fresh, and you figure, hey, my mission is to get this graduate degree. I don't have time for, hanging out, being too social. Friends and family is not that important to me at this point. So I'm here to just buckle down and get this done. That's fine. Some people can operate like that. But then there are others who say, no, I need some friends and family to be around me to help me through this. That's fine, whatever. So, you know, that may be important. So think about these three pieces here, and maybe all of these are important, and you can work it out like that. But you know, these are really things that you really need to think about once you decide that this is the program that you want to pursue. Now, again, in terms of how you begin, a typical undergraduate who really is concentrated on developing their academic potential. Say you're a sophomore here at Central Penn College, and you're thinking, I know exactly what I want, I know how I'm going to go about getting it, and so I'm not going to waste any time. I am going to start at the very beginning of my junior year. You know, they've got 2 years to go before they even graduate with their bachelor's degree. But 2 years is not a bad time to start to think about doing the research it's going to require to take you on this journey to your graduate degree. Okay? 2 years is not too early to start the work. So when you keep that in mind, you know, and it will take work. It's going to take a lot of work on your part to do all this research to make sure that you want to go in this certain direction for your graduate degree. Now, the other thing I want you to keep in mind, though, there are some programs that require you to graduate with your bachelor's degree and go out and get 1, 2, or 3 years of experience before you actually apply to the graduate degree program. A lot of business programs, a lot of MBAs are like that. They will require you, you know, 2 years work experience required before you even graduate. Before you even apply to this. So you certainly want to keep that in mind too. But some programs don't require that work experience. So again, please keep in mind, you know, be very careful when you look at what these requirements are in terms of what they need for to be admitted, to be considered for admission. Something else that people kind of forget sometime, and you should keep in mind that, you know, quality volunteer work is something else that people like to see in your application and or your resume. So if at any point during your undergraduate career you have a chance to participate in some sort of volunteer or community type service, that is starting to look more and more attractive to graduate school admissions committees as well as to employers. So please keep that in mind because it is becoming more and more important now. Visiting the campus, again, you cannot not visit the campus or the campuses that you are thinking about applying to. Now, that might require a little bit more time than you expected, and it might be a little expensive because, you know, it's going to be on you. You have to foot the bill to go wherever you want to do, wherever you want to go to get this to happen. So visiting the campus is very, very important, but it's not always possible. So when you absolutely cannot visit the campus, what are you going to do? Online resources. You can certainly check the website of the school that you're interested, or schools that you're interested in applying to. Hopefully they will have virtual tours that they provide online, and then maybe an online chat with an admissions counselor or maybe a faculty member or professor in the program to which you're applying. So think about that too if there's absolutely no way that you wouldn't be able to, visit the campus. Because, you know, you're going to be spending at least a couple of years in this whole process, whether it's a master's degree, probably more like a couple of years. A doctoral degree is going to be a lot more. So you want to check out the places that you're applying to, just so you can see what they're like. Now, this is what we're going to start out with in terms of how you're going to go about applying. These are the mechanics, the actual mechanics of getting this done. Your application is the first piece that you're going to start with, no doubt. Most places now have strictly online applications. There may be still a few that have paper applications, so either way, just, you know, you want to get it done. How many applications are you thinking about submitting? I have a little bit of a loose formula that I like to share with you in terms of how many schools that you should think about. I like to say a minimum of 6. Minimum of 6 schools. Now, this is 2 schools that you think are relatively easy for you to be admitted to. You know, relatively easy. Then another 2 schools that you're thinking, I'm kind of shooting for the moon on this one. I'm not sure I have a really good chance, but it might be worth it anyway. So it might be a little bit more difficult for you to be admitted to this, but I'm going to say do it anyway. So 2 schools that are relatively easy, another 2 that might be a little on the difficult side, and then the final 2 are going to be those that are just kind of middle of the road. You're not sure, but yeah, maybe I can probably get admitted here, but I'm not sure. So 2, 2, and 2, a minimum of 6, that's what I would suggest, okay? And of course, if you can do a lot more than that, that's fine. But of course, something that might be a limiting factor here is application fees. Now, you know, it's going to cost, and you already know that, of course. But how much is it going to cost is probably the real big deal. I don't think you're going to find any application fees to any graduate programs that are going to be less than $45 or $50. That's really going to be the most economical one I think that you can find. Now, what's the maximum? They can go up to $90 or $100, or maybe some even over $100. It just depends. It really does. Sometimes medical school application fees can really be expensive, as can law school. But 45 or 50 bucks is probably the cheapest it's going to be. So if that's going to be a limiting factor for you, you want to keep that in mind. That's the minimum, $45 or $50. Now, transcripts. Well, we know what your transcripts are. It's that wonderful piece of paper that is a complete record of your academic history at wherever you completed your bachelor's degree. So, transcripts must be submitted. There's no way around that. They must be official. And another key piece that you must remember here in terms of your transcripts is if you attended more than one college, okay, in your undergraduate career, you're going to have to get a transcript from each of the colleges that you attended. So if you went to 3 different colleges, but you got your bachelor's degree here, that's fine. You're going to have to, of course, submit your Central Penn transcript. But if you went to HAC or, I don't know, Lebanon Valley College, wherever, if you took some formal work at those universities, you must also contact those colleges and get those transcripts. You know, don't be fooled by the fact that those colleges will be listed on your Central Penn transcript, but the complete information will not be. That's why you must contact all of the institutions that you attended in terms of having those transcripts ready to be submitted, okay? So those are the basic 3 pieces. Now, there are, of course, a number of other things that, or items that can be considered for admission. And again, a lot of it depends on the program. Some of these things, some schools might require all of the things that are listed here. Some may not require any. Some might require only 1 or 2. But it's important for you to look at all of these so that you'll be prepared for whatever that, whatever you may encounter in terms of your application. Test scores. Okay, now test scores, you're thinking GRE, the Graduate Record Exam, which is probably the most common standardized test that most graduate degrees require a score from. There is the General GRE, which is sometimes I call it like an upper level SAT because it measures the same information. There's your quantitative section, your verbal section, and your analytical writing. So you have those 3 sections on the General GRE. It's a computer-based test, strictly computer-based. It costs about $185. And your score, you can take the test and your score is good for 5 years. After that 5th year, if you're going to submit that score somewhere, you're going to have to take it again, unfortunately. But the GRE is probably the most common standardized test that's required. Now, there's also a GRE subject test. The subject test is a little bit different in that it covers only 7 different areas: math, biochemistry, physics, psychology, literature and English, chemistry, and biology. And it is a paper-based pencil paper test. It's not computer-based at all. It's also going to cost you $185. So if a program is going to require you to take both of those tests, you need to be careful to make sure that they require just the general test or the subject test or both. Because if it's going to be both, that's kind of expensive and it's also pretty time-consuming. So please make sure that you know which score they need, or if they need both or only one. The GMAT, the Graduate Management Admission Test, is another standardized test that is required from time to time for business programs. So if you're applying to an MBA program, the GMAT is probably going to be required. It too is computer-based. It's a little expensive, about $250 to register for that test. But again, it's mostly designed for those people who are interested in pursuing a business-related curriculum, whether it's an MBA, accounting, or something along those lines. Then there are other tests. The Miller Analogies test is one that's quite popular. The law school admission test is also quite popular, but of course that's designed specifically for law school. So, you know, these tests are, they can be very time-consuming. You can take preparatory courses in order to get yourself ready for these tests. You can buy or you can purchase study guides. You can check them out of a library or whatever. They have sample questions online for most of these, so there are all kinds of ways to prepare for them. And you can take the tests more than once. But again, remember that 5-year rule. If your score is more than 5 years old, you're going to have to retake the test with most of the ones that I just mentioned. Letters of recommendation. Okay, well, letters of recommendation are kind of subjective when you think about it, but if it's required, you have to get it done. Most cases, they will require 3 to 5 letters. Now, who do you get these letters from? Well, if you're still an undergraduate student or you're only a year or 2 out from being an undergraduate student and you still, know your faculty members, know the faculty members and or the professors, your academic advisor, those people that you had connections with, those are the types of people that you want to get your letters from. Academic advisor, faculty members, whatnot. What about someone who has graduated maybe 5, 10 or more years ago and they are interested, of course, in trying to identify people who's going to write a letter for me? I didn't keep any connections with any of the faculty members or any of my professors from undergraduate school. I'm so far removed from that, it's like I just can't do that. And that does happen from time to time. So typically in a situation like that, you're going to want to look at your workplace to see if there's someone at your workplace that would be able to write this letter for you. Now, this could be a direct supervisor, an indirect supervisor, or just someone else at your workplace who serves in a supervisory kind of a position. And those kinds of people would be good people to ask for letters of recommendation. The kinds of people you want to stay away from, of course, are relatives, good friends, those kinds of things. And you might chuckle a little bit, but believe me, I've seen some of those, and it's really quite comical. So you really want to be careful who you get these letters from. The other thing that you must do is you must stay on these people in terms of the time frame to make sure that they get the letter done and get it to the appropriate place at the appropriate time, because that's the last thing you want to do. You've got a mountain of things that you're already trying to get ready for your application. And a lot of times letters of recommendation are the piece that kind of falls through the cracks because you kind of forget that, oh my gosh, I forgot to remind Dr. Martin that my reference is due in 2 weeks and I don't even know where he is and whatever. So you really have to stay on these people to make sure that this happens in a timely fashion. And the last thing that I must say about letters of recommendation is please do not forget to write a thank you note to the people that do write these letters for you, because remember, they didn't have to do this, and it is kind of taking some extra time from their daily routine or whatnot, so please don't forget to write them a letter of a thank you letter once they get this done for you, okay? Resume is something else that is not always required for graduate admission, but it can be. And so honestly, even if it's not required, it may be a good piece to submit anyway, because again, it does give, particularly for someone who has been out of undergraduate school for a few years. So the resume can really highlight your work experience, especially say you've been out of undergraduate school for 10 years or so. So a resume can certainly highlight a different part of you. So you want to make sure that you have it available just in case, even though, like I said, even if it's not required, you could certainly consider submitting it anyway. The goal statement, or sometimes it's called the personal essay. Now, the personal essay, to me, is probably the most important piece of any graduate application. And that's for 2 reasons. One is that it shows the admissions committee that you can write a coherent sentence, a coherent paragraph, and a coherent piece that says, this is who I am, and this is why I'm a good fit for your program. Okay, so it shows that you can write well, because in a graduate program, you're going to be writing a lot more than you were in your undergraduate career. So that's just the way it is, so just get used to that now. Writing is very important. So you need to show these people up front that you have those kinds of skills. It has to be perfect, it really does. So not only in terms of the grammar and sentence structure and that sort of thing, but the other thing that it shows the admissions committee is that, again, you are a perfect fit for whatever their program offers. So just think about this. As an undergraduate student, you may, for whatever reason, you may have a research interest that is really, it's so huge, it's something that you really want to study. You want to study it so hard, it's going to drive where you go for your master's degree. And it's going to, you know, the rest of your life is going to be built around working on this research issue, topic, or whatever you want to call it. So let me throw this out to you. For anyone, this would probably, of course, be more interesting to someone who lives in the Louisiana area because of Hurricane Katrina and whatnot. But suppose there's somebody that has an interest in someone who is a psychology major, and they are interested in pursuing a master's or a PhD in psychology, and specifically adolescent psychology. Okay, so someone might be interested in something as specific as post-traumatic stress in adults following Hurricane Katrina. Okay, so for whatever reason, somebody's got that interest. And one way that they might start to look for a graduate program that is there a graduate program somewhere in Louisiana or wherever that has a psychology program that specifies post-traumatic stress and or adolescence, or the, you know, the melding of the two? Okay, so see, that's kind of a way that you can sort of help yourself figure that out. Okay, Tulane University, let me get on their website, let me look at their faculty in psychology, and let me see what the faculty research interests are, and do any of those interests match what I want to study? So you see how working it that way, you can kind of narrow down the program that you want to pursue, because there are already faculty at that university that are researching this particular area that you too are interested in. Okay, so you see, once you get all that together, that's when you put that down on paper in terms of your goal statement and say, I've already checked to see that you have a couple of professors in your psychology department who are studying this, and I have a burning desire to work with these faculty because I have the same interest. So that's what I mean by a good fit. Okay, so again, it's a very important piece. Now, not to say that your goal statement, if your goal statement doesn't cut the mustard, if you will, doesn't mean you won't be admitted to a program, because you know you've got so many pieces to look at: the test scores, the letters of recommendation, the resume, the goal statement, and it's not that one of these items alone is going to deny you admission. It's not that at all, but it's all of these together. But again, thinking that the goal statement is probably one of the most important pieces, because it shows that you can write and it shows that you're a good fit for the program. Okay? Now, there are just a few more items that are required for admission, but again, this is really kind of dependent on the kind of program that you are applying to. Earlier in my presentation, I mentioned the humanities, the English, music, dance, theater, and those. These are some pieces: a writing sample, a portfolio, and an audition. These are some additional pieces that may be required of an applicant if they are applying to those kinds of programs. And you can understand why a writing sample would be a key piece for an English program, or even something in the communications area. And then a portfolio and an audition. You know, those are, again, very humanities-driven kinds of things, and so it's just something else to add to your list that, you know, you're going to have to submit once you decide to apply to that particular program. The last piece that may be required for any degree program in a graduate school may be an interview. Okay? Now, and it's a requirement. You have to get there. Now, what if you've applied to a program that's 1,000 miles away, 2,000 miles away, or whatever? You just have to be prepared and get it done. Because I can promise you, chances are they are not going to pay your expenses to travel to wherever this school or wherever this interview is going to be. So you're going to have to make sure you work your budget a little bit and get to that interview if it's a requirement, because it's very important. In many cases, it's the last piece of the admission process. It's going to kind of make or break everything. But the other thing that an interview is going to do, of course, it gives you a chance to talk to professors. In a way, you're kind of turning the tables and you're kind of interviewing them to make sure that this is the place you want to be. So after you've knocked their socks off with your answers and whatnot, then you will have a chance to ask them questions and see again if this is going to be a perfect fit for you. Now, in some cases, an interview will not be required, but again, I cannot tell you, I can't stress to you enough how important it is to still visit this campus. So if an interview is not required, you can certainly feel free to request a visit to the department, or just a visit to the campus, to the department that you're applying to, so that you can maybe have some words with some professors there. What's also important in terms of this visit is to give you a chance to speak to other graduate students who are in the same program that you're applying to, so that you can get input from them. It's very valuable. And then again, just so you can see the lay of the land in terms of what you may be in for should they decide to offer you admission, and if you accept the admission, okay? And the bottom line in the interview is just be prepared. Be prepared financially, be prepared with questions for them as they will have for you. Be prepared to speak to current graduate students that are there, and just to kind of hang out and just take in the area, especially if you're really thinking about going there if you're offered admission. Okay, now financing. This is a real big concern and should be for students who are thinking about going on to graduate school, because a lot of people are still suffering with their undergraduate financial aid issues, whether they're repaying loans or trying to figure out how to repay a loan. It's not a pretty picture. But you can't let that stop you from still at least considering, yes, a graduate degree is in my future, and I'm going to figure out how to pay for it. And there are ways that you can do that. Your employer, again, if you're a full-time working adult, and if your employer is kind of suggesting that, hey, you ought to think about going back for a master's degree, and we'll pay for part of it. They may reimburse all of your tuition. They may reimburse only a part of it. And that's one of the best ways to get some financial assistance if you're currently working and then going for a graduate degree. There are research or teaching assistantships that are available, but these are typically ways for a full-time graduate student to help themselves out. It would be very difficult, if not actually close to impossible, to actually be a full-time working adult and to be a full-time graduate student and have a teaching or a research assistantship. So these are typically relegated to full-time students. And it's really one of the better forms of financial assistance to have, because it will, in general, they will pay your tuition and they will also give you a small stipend. So it's really kind of like work study. I mean, you're actually working in the department of your major, or sometimes you're not in the department. You might just be in some other area on campus performing a job, getting paid for it, albeit sometimes it's minimum wage, sometimes it's a little bit more than that. But the big deal is that your tuition is waived because you've got the award of the assistantship, and then you are getting a small stipend. So that really is a very good way for a full-time graduate student to finance their education. There are also grants, there are scholarships, and of course grants and scholarships are wonderful too, because that's money that's given to you. You don't have to pay it back, it's not a loan. And I do have some websites that I'm going to share with you in a couple of minutes that will kind of help you to explore that and to research, because it is getting more and more difficult to get financing for your education. There's cutbacks at every level, federal, state. The money's just not there the way it used to be, and you need to know that ahead of time, so then you know that, okay, this is really going to be a challenge, but I'm going to get it done, because you can still get it done. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to look for money. Unfortunately, it's not out there as much as it used to be, but it's not all gone. So don't let that stop you. Loans, again, that's the last thing that somebody who's applying to graduate school wants to do, is to incur another loan. but sometimes it happens. Stafford loans are very common among graduate students, as they are with undergraduates. So again, if a loan is the only way that you can make this work, it might just end up being like that. But there are loans out there for graduate students. Typically, with an assistantship, if you are going to apply for an assistantship, you may need to do it a little bit earlier than usual. For example, and I'm talking now more about full-time graduate students. A deadline for someone to apply as a full-time graduate student for a fall semester would typically be December, January, or February, earlier that year. December, January, or February for the following fall. Now, if you are going to be applying for a graduate assistantship, some schools will require you to apply maybe a month earlier. So you're looking at actually an October application deadline for that. So, just be prepared just in case. Be prepared to have your information in earlier in order to make yourself more competitive for this assistantship or two that's out there. And the last piece that you need to keep in mind also is your test scores. Whether it's, again, the GRE or the GMAT, test scores may be a consideration in terms of awarding you an assistantship. Okay, so earlier application deadline and then test scores in terms of the consideration for that financial assistance. And my final slide right now gives you some different websites that I could recommend that you look at. There are all kinds of information on all of these. The first grouping, the first four, are in reference to the admission process for the most part and just awareness of different programs. And then the final three are really more geared towards the financial issues that you will need to take under consideration as you proceed through your graduate school search. So, at this point in the presentation, that's the end of my slides, and I guess at this point I would like to entertain any questions if there happen to be any.